faster grow it. From the Stash Podcast.
This episode is brought to you by Stash Blend. I've been using Stash Blend for over a year now, and it's awesome. One of the things that I really like is that it saves me money. It's a whole bunch of different inputs in one. So I no longer have to go out there and buy a silica bottle, then a separate seaweed bottle, beneficial bacteria, then a separate one for mycorrhizal fungi. All of that plus more is in this one blend. Go to stashblend.com to learn more about it, and I also have a link down in the YouTube description section below.
A huge shout out to AC Infinity. They recently released their humidifier. This is an easy top fill system that allows you to adjust the moisture levels from the outside of your tent. It connects to the Controller 69, which makes things so much easier to use. You can follow it on your app, you can see it from outside the tent without ever having to step inside. If you head over to acinfinity.com, use promo code THESTASH15, you can save a few dollars off not only the humidifier, but all of their products. And while you're at it, thank them for being a sponsor of today's video.
The Stash Podcast. Welcome back, boys.
Hey,
Good to see you.
What's going on, everybody?
back for another one, and we got a guest this time.
Should I
Brandon's
just,
in the house.
introduce myself?
Please,
Yeah.
if you wouldn't mind.
Invite us before we forget, because that's how we do. Because Chris invited me before this.
Well, thanks for having me on again, guys. My name's Brandon Rust, for anybody who's not familiar with me. I'm the owner of Bokashi Earthworks. We specialize in manufacturing soil, microbial consortiums. We sell organic amendments, and we work with NASA Agricultural Technologies distributing their carbon-based fertilizer, the Humate fertilizer. And, I've been cultivating and breeding for well over 20 years. And I also do a lot of soil agronomy in consulting all over the country with all types of different farms.
That's great, man. I've seen a lot of your work, and as a matter of fact, we had Nick from Cured Leaf. Was that Rooted Leaf? I'm sorry, Rooted Leaf, and he had quite a conversation in regards to carbon-based nutrients, and that was kind of very enlightening. It's something I hadn't considered until we had him on. It's something that you've been working on for a minute.
Well, the technology was developed in the early 1980s by my mentor, Dr. George Kaltizes. He was an engineer for NASA. He was actually the director of structural engineering on the Apollo space project. And so he's got a bunch of different degrees. He did his master thesis on carbon dynamics and gasification of coal. And so he understood what coal was, the different forms and varieties of coal, and in this case, lignite, which also known as leonardinite. So if you've ever gotten a box of like humic or fulvic acids, maybe from like a company like Down to Earth or something like that, essentially they're just taking this organic mineral called leonardinite, which is lignite coal, and then they're micronizing it. We actually have a process. Dr. George developed it's a fractionation process where they actually are able to extract all of the mineral elements that plant needs from that lignite, because it was all decomposed organic plant material at one point that mineralized. And so encapsulated in this mineral is things like nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, secondary and micronutrients, as well as those organic functional groups like carboxylic acid. And those are the functional groups that create humic and fulvic acids. And so he has a process to where we can extract the humic and fulvic acid as well as the mineral nutrition from that source. And, that's what we have the NutriGrow pot, which is, we use humate fertilizer. We use that process for the fertilizer. And essentially this is a compost-based pot that is actually a complete fertilizer, carbon-based fertilizer. 9-10-9 formulation. It's a replacement for single-use plastics and for starter fertilizers. So if you were to plant, let's say, 50,000 NutriGrow pots in a hectare for tomatoes, right, that you would essentially have, 150,000 grams or 1,500 kilos of fertilizer for a hectare. You wouldn't need to actually fertilize anything. It builds soil health. It adds organic matter to the soil. So it's a really advanced fertilizer technology that can be used in multiple different applications, this being one of those applications. And so we've been working with NASA Ag, and we're actually going to create a new company here pretty soon. It's called Carbotech or Carbodynamics LLC. It'll be a corporation, I think, but it's a joint venture between Bokashi Earthworks and NASA Agricultural Technologies. We want to build out a factory to manufacture the humate fertilizer here in Oklahoma and to manufacture these pots, 120 million units of these a year. So that's one of the things we're currently working on.
Those are really fascinating. We were actually looking at those just a couple weeks ago. We pulled those up, and I thought, wow, that's something that I'm going to need in my garden, just based on the fact that it's just so easy to use. I'm kind of curious. How do you get into this? How did you start getting into this field, if you will, this industry?
I smoke really good. That shit.
It's a great introduction. Great introduction.
And it just makes my mind go. You know what I mean? I really like these varieties that are really heady. You know what I mean? And I was trapping for a long time. You know, I think a lot of people know my story. I'm from San Diego. I was trapping for a long, long time, about 18 years. Got into the legal side of the business in Oklahoma, and I already had the Bokashi Earthworks business. It was more of it was a side hustle. But when I got out to Oklahoma here, I put it on paper, turned it into an actual business. And even though for the first 2 years it was still a side hustle, because mostly what I was doing was agronomic consulting. I was working at farms. I was building farms and doing that stuff. But then the third year, about 4 months into the third year, I was like, man, I have to do this full time now. It's just, the business has been expanding. It's been getting bigger and bigger, 85% growth rate year over year. So we're at a point now where we're ready to do, take on investment capital and stuff like that. But, the way I got into it was with, my background in cultivation, working in the legal space. And then I was fortunate enough to be using the social media platform to do a lot of networking. And I talk to every single person that DMs me, and I'm on there to use it as a platform for what it's supposed to be used for, not just to like show, oh, hey, here's a picture. I use it for networking purposes. And that's how I met Dr. George, through somebody else. He sent me some of the Dr. George's formulations, and I was like, dude, what the heck is this? This stuff is incredible. I need to learn more about this. And he didn't have the answers, because at this point, I'm doing soil agronomy. I'm doing these living soil systems. I'm working all over the country in different capacities. Dr. George calls me to tell me about what's going on, and I had a conversation with him for about 45 minutes, and he was really impressed with everything that I was doing. And because I take a real holistic approach to the cultivation side of things, we look at nutrient dynamics, we look at biology, we look at, environment, we look at light, just everything collectively. And so he invited me out to Chicago to NASA Agricultural Technologies, and 2 weeks later, I was there. I was like, I'm not going to sit on this opportunity. So I flew out there. I met Dr. George and his wife, and I started going out there every couple of months. He started teaching me a lot of stuff that I didn't know. He taught me about fertilizer manufacturing, taught me about, all the science behind all the stuff that we're doing. He's given me tons and tons of book recommendations out of his own personal library. Like, one of my favorites is Principles and Applications of Soil Microbiology. It's a phenomenal book. And so it's given me a great insight, because oftentimes, there's so much information available, and limiting and narrowing that information down to like really, really good sources has been kind of has been real helpful in what George has done. So he gives me all the books that I need, and if I have questions, I can ask him. So that's kind of like my thing. I read a lot of books, science white papers. I want to see if the science is applicable in real life situations, because I tell people all the time, the science doesn't matter if it's done in a lab and there's no real world application. The science doesn't mean then. The science only is valid when it has real world application, and it's not just something that can be seen as anecdotal evidence, but that can be seen on hard data. So everything I do is data driven. All the systems that I've developed for cultivation when it comes to biological crop steering and the fertigation based off of soil data analytics. And that's kind of like what I specialize in. And that's what I built my company on, really, really solid products that are innovative, that have better use efficiency, that are more cost effective. So everybody has a better experience all around.
That's awesome. Yeah, there's there's people that are book smart, and then there are people who are street smart, right? Or people that actually have the experience, and you've got both. And we often get criticism for people who have a PhD, but then they have no growing experience, right? So they're relaying all this information that's important to them that they've read in books, but as far as a home grower or even a commercial operator actually applying it into the garden there, it's like there's not much real takeaways from there. What you do, and you've got so much information on your Instagram alone, where there is information that you can actually take and utilize in the garden, and that's one thing that is awesome, is that you put out that type of information. And yeah, the crop steering thing, we wanted to kind of get into that a little bit here, if you're willing to.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just recently put on my feed the bio crop steering protocols for the things that I use, and they consist of the Microbe Plus, which is a multifunctional probiotic. It's also the same consortium. This was the same consortium that was discovered by Dr. Tiro Haiga in Japan. It is a consortium of several different lactic acid bacteria, Bacillus subtilis, a purple non-sulfur photosynthetic bacteria, and a fermentive yeast. And I like to use these a multifunctional probiotic to help cycle nutrients like phosphorus, manganese, iron, helps with availability through the production of sidiophores. A lot of the bacteria produce sidiophores that help with enhanced nutrient uptake. It helps the microbes also produce chemical compounds. There's some enzymes called phosphatase, which solubilizes inorganic phosphorus and liberates it into a plant available phosphate. There's also some enzymes called proteases, which break down protein constituents. So anything that is organic matter, leaf material, animal, it's all constructed out of proteins. And this enzyme essentially breaks proteins down, liberating the chemical constituents, the plant available ions, into solution. And so they also produce things like target selective antimicrobial and antifungal compounds that can kill pathogens. So I use that as a biweekly inoculation throughout almost the whole entire cycle, usually stopping around week 7 or 8, depending on flowering time. And that is really just for overall soil health, right? It's a microbial inoculant. It's a probiotic. And then I use specific consortiums. So that's one of them, which is that. And then I also have another consortium, which is Bacillus subtilis, which is a bacteria, and Trichoderma harzianum T22 strain, which is a fungus. And the reason why I prefer Trichoderma over something like arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi like Glomus intraradices, for example, which is one that's currently marketed towards the plants that we're cultivating, is that in these modified systems, whether it's a peat-based or a cocoa-based soil, or even if it's just a straight cocoa substrate, we're often not limited on water or phosphorus because we've built these things to be abundant in those nutrients. And those types of conditions are usually what are needed to create the chemical signaling between the plant and the fungi, arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, to create a relationship. Now, if those resources are already there and the plant has access to them, the plant isn't going to expend metabolic energy to try to make an association with those microorganisms. And so I like to use the trichoderma because the trichoderma has the same effect. It can act as an endophyte, but it doesn't necessarily need to have the signaling induced by the plant to make that association. And then the trichoderma is also more of a fierce competitor for resources. So it just can outcompete almost all other fungi or pathogens that could be in the soil system. And then the reason why I also like the trichoderma is known for it has the highest affinity for iron, and it's because it has the highest production capacity for sidiophores. And sidiophores are iron chelating or nutrient chelating organic compounds. So they essentially create these rings that encapsulate the ions, keeping them in a plant available form. In the case of iron, it's so highly oxidative that it's oftentimes a limited nutrient in these types of highly oxidative systems where you have a lot of gas and water and oxygen exchange. So having the trichoderma and Bacillus subtilis will increase that photosynthetic nutrient. Now, when we're talking about biocrop steering, similar to the way that an agronomist looks at how much nutrients or fertilizer is needed, the timing and the placement, those are also important. The trichoderma and Bacillus subtilis, you don't have to do them a lot, 2 to 3 times per harvest cycle. And I typically do one at mid-veg, right? Because we want that iron availability because iron's a photosynthetic nutrient. And it's really important to have iron available at that time. And then I like to do again when the plant is bolting, right? When you flip and the plant starts to put on all that biomass for the first 2-3 weeks of flowering, I also like to do that because that's at a point where the plant is actually consuming the most amount of nutrition. And then I also like to do it about the 3rd week of flower. And that is really just for pathogen suppression. So I'm spraying the phytosphere and I'm drenching the media because the trichoderma and Bacillus subtilis can also act as an endophyte. So it can enter into the plant's tissue and protect the plant from pathogens like botrytis and powdery mildew. So it's multifunctional. They cycle nutrients. They help with nutrient uptake. They outcompete pathogens. It's a multifunctional consortium. And the cool thing is when you use both of them together, the bacteria will actually live on the fungal filaments. As this trichoderma grows, the fungal hyphae, the subtilis will actually colonize those. And they produce such similar metabolites that they increase the efficacy of each other. So that's one of the second parts of the biocrop steering. Another is the use of entomopathogenic fungus. Now, things like Beauveria bassiana and Metatar harzanium and espolate, they're both used as biocontrols. But what most people don't know is that they can also live as free-living soil microorganisms that are stratophytic. They break down organic matter. They cycle nutrients. They can also make endophytic relationships with the plant, protecting them internally from other pathogens and insects. Now, Beauveria bassiana is great because it has so many different modes in which it procreates. It loves to, it loves to operate as an insect pathogen. So it'll basically create an enzyme called chitinase, which degrades the exoskeleton of insects, and then it gets inside of their circulatory system with these spores, and it just consumes them from the inside, causes white muscadine disease. Now, once it sporulates, those spores can actually live in the soil, they can live on the plant. And so again, it's another multifunctional product that helps with nutrient cycling, pathogen suppression, and insect suppression. And so this is another thing that we like to inoculate about once every other week, just as a method of biocontrol. And then the last thing that I really like for the biocrop steering protocol is going to be the cold pressed Kiaha. Now, I'm sure that some of the listeners are familiar with Kiaha. Jay Plant Speaker popularized it, and Build the Soil did a collaboration with him with a dry formulation. Now, there's some advantages and disadvantages of the cold press versus the dry. The dry has a higher total saponin content, but less biodiversity, and it doesn't have the bioactive compounds, but it does have a longer storage life. The cold pressed Kiaha contains all of the bioactive compounds, a higher number and diversity of saponins, and it acts as a biostimulant as well.
I got a crazy question for you. What's saponin?
A saponin is an organic soap. So it is a soap, and what this does is it decreases the surface tension of water. So if you have ever seen a mosquito land on water and not sink, it's because there's actual surface tension on that water. What Kiaha does, these natural soaps, is it decreases the surface tension, and that allows for nutrients and minerals to fall into that solution easier, and it also mobilizes those ions and distributes them more evenly throughout your media. A good example of this is if you were to do a nutrient top dress on your soil, the majority of that nutrient is at the very top of that media. When you start watering in things like Kiaha, which is a surfactant, it helps distribute and move those elemental ions throughout that media. Now, the cold pressed Kiaha also contains cytokinin, indole 3-acetic acid, gibberellic acid, salicylic acid, calcium oxalate, amino acids, with 108 total saponins, 52 bioactive saponins. And so you can use this in biocrop steering at 1 to 2 milliliters per gallon of water, just to water frequently every couple of weeks. But you can also use this as an IPM product at 20 milliliters per gallon. And what happens is when you spray the plant with this, any insects that feed on those saponins, what it does is those saponins actually fuse the digestive enzymes together. So it makes it so that the insect's digestive enzymes no longer function. And so they might start feeding, but then they can't digest. So they start becoming lethargic and lazy. Eventually they die off from starvation. But it has an overall net positive effect, and it's great to add into things like sprays when you're doing foliar applications with like Epsom salt, for instance. It just helps with the distribution and total coverage over the plant surface area and through the media.
Yes, I mean, I think that makes sense where a lot of people would implement these things. One thing I think people who are new to the concept of crop steering in general is what would be the benefits of, let's say, traditional crop steering versus now with biological crop steering. What made you lean more towards this side?
Well, when we're looking at what is considered traditional crop steering, typically people are doing this with hydroponic systems. And most of what they're doing is really they're just looking at their EC, which isn't a good gauge of total overall nutrition. Doesn't mean it's balanced. It just means electrical conductivity of that solution, of that hydroponic solution. So it's not really a good gauge from a data points perspective, especially coming from someone who looks at extensive, parts per million of calcium, sulfur, phosphorus, magnesium, potassium, look at every single element, what ratios those are. They're not looking at those. They're not looking at crop steering from a nutritional perspective. They're really looking at it from an environmental perspective. And so that includes doing drybacks, which increases EC. It's really focusing in on your VPD, vapor pressure deficits, and also your DLI and the PPFD and the amount in time that the lights are on, the light intensity, and the spectrum of those lights. So that's, I think, that more of the base for the crop steering with those typical things. When I'm talking about biological crop steering, what we're doing is instead of implementing fertilizers or the use of fertilizers, we're implementing certain types of microbes that are going to increase the use and efficiency of what you already have or what's already in the media, as well as eliciting plant-specific responses. Because things like the trichoderma, not only do those nutrient cycling and out-competing pathogens and all that other stuff, but they actually signaled plant immune defense responses. So it will upregulate some of these genetic responses, and the plant will respond to the inoculations. And when you do this at certain periods of time, it causes what's a weak stress response, where you're not causing a physiological response, but the plant is chemically inducing a weak stress response that's going to upregulate a certain genetic trait. And that could increase certain output capacities like terpene production or cannabinoid production, because these secondary metabolites that the plant is producing is ultimately a defense mechanism to self-preserve itself.
Absolutely, man. I think that people oftentimes misconstrue crop steering with just thinking force feeding their plants. And I think the fact that you outline the whole side of basically it's really environmental, and that's the biggest side of things. I think implementing this when you're looking at it from like a probiotic side of things, a lot of people in the commercial settings are always very big on sterilization, clean, just so they could pass for their COAs. Do you see now the commercial setting kind of transitioning into more organic and into more of this kind of crop steering method?
Yeah, because it takes a company like Bokashi Earthworks to implement these types of protocols and show proof of concept and have continued success harvest after harvest with multiple different farms. And we do see more people getting on board. And it's one of the reasons why my company continues to grow. And it's not just related, but this is also in conventional agriculture. We can implement these same types of practices across a wide range of agriculture, not just.
Yeah, I feel like when it really boils down to it, it's always the worry of people trying to push their plants as much as they can and not test for heavy metals. Rarely is it trying to get the end result that's the best. It's following an SOP that's worked in California, Colorado, Washington. Here in Michigan, it's like everybody has the same thing. It's Grodan, Athena.
Yeah. Well, we see we see those business models fail countless times over and over. Look at MedMen; they were once valued at like $10 billion, and now they're worthless. They're essentially worth the price of used equipment, which you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Call up Tony, and he might help you liquidate your stock. But you know what I mean. It's a joke for the most part, dude. If you're not nobody's going into this going, oh, I'm going to grow as much mids as possible. Everybody thinks they're growing the best, but a lot of these varieties and a lot of these methods are just with a facelift. I say that all the time.
It's just not compressed. That's all.
With a facelift, dude. That's all it is. You know what I mean? The options are better than what I had when I was 15, but it doesn't mean it's still good. It doesn't mean it's good quality. A lot of these places.
The problem is nobody complains though. Nobody's complaining of that. The average person, the average consumer doesn't care. They want 35% THC. Send them on their way.
And it's fine. And those markets will be serviced, and those people will be treated like custies. You know what I mean? But the people that don't want to be treated like a custy, the people who are like want to know who their breeders are, who's cultivating, they're gonna step out of that box. You know what I mean? Because you can get custied for years, and I know people who are like, oh, I know what's up. I've been smoking 20 years. It's like, yeah, but you've been getting custied for 20 years, bro. So you don't really know what's up. It's like, it's hard for people to accept that sometimes too. You know what I mean? Because look at back in the day, there was Chronic and there was Mexi. You know what I mean? Those were the choices. You want Chronic or you want Mexi. It wasn't indoor or outdoor. It was Chronic, and you knew the difference. And then there was the in between, which is the Pretendica, which would come around Christmas time, and you get those nice fluffy Mexi pillows, that weren't as bad. They didn't have seeds. They had a little bit of frost on them, and so the options are greater and the choices look better, but it doesn't necessarily mean the quality is any better, because I could smoke some of that old 3 to 5% Mex and get higher than I could off of some of this dispensary that looks 10 times better than that.
Ain't that the truth, man? I think, a lot of it is depending where you're at. So I'm in Michigan, but when I travel out to Vegas and the once in a blue moon that we stop at a dispensary, you notice you can't smell anything. You can't handle it at all. You just look at it. So if it has that good Instagram look or that good High Times magazine look, it's good enough. And if the bud tender is the person who's dictating this, they're so ignorant and they're basing it on the market. And the market's been wrong. Terpenes is in a conversation. Flavonoids is in a conversation. It's look, cost per pound, and THC.
And you have to remember too, Vegas is a goddamn desert. Every time I've ever gone in desert, you go to break up a joint and it turns to dust. You know what I mean? It's got no terps because one, it takes like 6 months to get to the shelves, and by the time it's been on that shelf, who knows how long it's been sitting there? It's dry as. I know exactly what you're saying, because I went to go to a legitimate farm. I'm not gonna, I went to the dispensary. I know that this farm grows good. You know what I mean? I know who they are, but there's a disconnect in the supply chain, and it's all because of stupid regulation and farms not just being able to supply patients.
Amen to that. I think, well, you see that from here to Canada, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. The grinder industry, unfortunately, struggles in Nevada. Not many. You can just break it apart.
Yeah.
Well, we ran into, when we were there recently, freeze-dried flour. And while it was extremely interesting, and when you consume it in a bowl, it was great. But I'm a blunt guy, and it was unsmokable for me. But the terpenes were there. The texture was weird, but man, were the terpenes there.
So I had my first experience with freeze-dried not too long ago. It was just a couple months ago. And I'm skeptical because I'm traditional. You know, I've done this the same way forever. But I popped these jars, man. It looked like it was fresh off the plant. And I had 4 samples. 2 of the samples banging terps. They looked great. Everything was great. I smoked it. It right. I was like, cool. 2 of them were just not grown well. You know, I think that was the issue. It was like I had 2 good samples of 2 good, you know, so, but I don't smoke blunts and I don't really smoke joints. So I never actually tried rolling it up. I just smoked it out of the bong, and I was impressed. I was like, you know what? Whoever did this did a really good job. I can't complain. As a consumer, I would never fucking know if someone didn't tell me.
And I think that's where, like, you solve some of those issues in areas like Las Vegas, or in the areas of people who are wanting to maintain these things. Because if you're looking for crop steering for yield and overall try to get your 3 a light situation, like a lot of people will do in the commercial market or even homegrown market, if the end result is terpless, dry bammer, then it gets to the point where you're like, man, we need to figure another way. And I think in areas like that, maybe, I'm not saying that's the only solution, but there's an issue with the moisture content. I've seen in Michigan, people will over dry their stuff and then rehydrate it afterwards, as if that's going to be good smoke. But they do it because these regulations force them to do it, because they're concerned about testing for microbes, heavy metals, all these variables that really would be fire smoke if they would stop messing with it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the bane in everybody's side testing. Oh shit, are we going to pass? That's one of the things that we haven't had issues with everybody, because, you know, here's the thing. As a company, we test all of our stuff through the University of Lafayette. They have a geosciences lab that Dr. Anna runs, and we just shoot our stuff over there. It's $10. It only costs $10. So it's like irresponsible not to test inputs.
Yeah, $10. See, and that's the thing. Looking into your background a little bit, we were originally in San Diego, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then going from San Diego to Oklahoma, what's the difference in how they're doing these tests? I mean, the fact $10, everyone should be doing it, clearly. But have you noticed it being more lenient and relaxed in Oklahoma as a newer area? Versus,
no, absolutely not. We have some of the most stringent testing requirements in the country. We have to do cannabinoids, terpenes, mycotoxins, residual solvents, total yeast and mold, heavy metals, and did I say mycotoxins already?
Yep.
So we have, you know, and heavy metals. So we have really low thresholds on everything. I think we have 10% of what California has. California has 90% higher threshold than Oklahoma.
Wow, of all places.
Yeah.
You'd think California would be the tightest on everything. That makes sense why most of the
Oklahoma is the tightest on everything, dude. And you have to pass visual inspection too.
Visual? How does that even happen?
If someone sees visual contaminants in the product, they won't even finish the testing. They'll say, "Oh, dude, this is
just based on subjective
bug. You got bugs in your weed or something," and then they won't even finish the testing. You'll just get a failure.
Heaven forbid there's bugs in it.
Well, yeah, I've only smoked cocoons in my brick before with little stones and all sorts of. In Michigan, somehow we're the brick haven. Like, I had Mexican brick until we had chronic, and I love that you reference it as chronic too. But the testing here has gotten so tight that all these brands that have good genetics, you think that cultivar is fire, permanent marker floating around.
Yeah,
you know, chemistry, some really nice flavors, but then in the end product, it's so dry, like we're in California, or not California, Las Vegas, and the terpenes aren't there. There's a couple brands. There's one which is crazy. They're an MSO, but it was Grown Rogue, where they were nitro sealing.
You're in Michigan?
Yeah.
So I work with a company out there called Sour Flower.
Sour Flower. Oh,
yeah, they're in the middle of nowhere. I think they're in Paw Paw, Michigan, bro.
Familiar.
Okay, so check out them. They're crushing it. They're doing mixed light greenhouse right now. They're running all the Bokashi earthwork stuff, and they're like, dude, it looks phenomenal.
Nice. Yeah, I'm always looking for something because, like, I'm a home grower. I've been for years. I'm a caregiver myself still. But there's people who will be like, man, what can I get some fire when I'm out there? And I'm like, I don't want to just give you the name of the cultivar or even the brand because, again, there's the chain. The chain is a real issue. And I see it's clearly not just here. If it's happening in, Nevada, California, Oklahoma, it's
Yep.
this weird breakup of it. And I think that's where the disconnect between the regulations and the final quality product. It's not always bad growers. It's the fact that dank never gets transitioned into the consumer's hands properly.
Yeah. Yep. It's a distribution problem. It's same thing I think in California. I don't think that farms can go directly to a dispensary. They purposely made it so you have to go through a middleman, which is one of the reasons why you see all the fuckery going on with like the thing that Blacklist posted on that dispo. Oh, we don't have to pay our small mom and pop vendors and stuff. Like those people don't have a choice but to go through those people. Like they're forced into that situation. And if that distributor decides to shelf you over another brand or something like that, you're either waiting to get paid or you're not getting paid or your product is sitting on the shelf spoiling, you know what I mean? Oxidizing or flying up, so in places like California, you're dependent on your distributor to move your product. And if they're not doing their jobs, you as a farm have no control over it. And it's such a stupid business model. But here's the thing. The people in California knew that, the legislators, and all of the farmers out there, it's like they all like you go and show up to the Capitol, go and march, like if you got to go and I'm not saying go get violent, but go get a little rowdy, dude. Make fucking noise. You know what I mean? It's not like that's what people in Oklahoma do. They'll go to the Capitol. They'll be in the buildings, in the legislator's office, yelling, dude. Groups of people, and it takes holding people accountable. But here's the thing: California is kind of different too, because if you think about the GDP of California, the state of California is like the 5th largest economy in the entire world. Like it has larger economies than most countries. Now we take into consideration how much money got pocketed and pulled out of independent operator farms through taxes, legislation, licensing, compliance. Somebody made out, bro. Somebody made out, and it wasn't the farmers. But somebody's pockets are lined right now.
And I think that's where it's keeping the legacy market afloat. And I'm not mad at that because it's like oftentimes you're seeing people who care more about their product because they're like, man, I couldn't stomach this regulation. I couldn't take it where I knew that this beautiful end product is not the beautiful end product that I created.
Yeah.
And it's like I couldn't imagine somebody who's truly in this for the product and the plant who's then having to battle and navigate through the cash side because money is always, they say, the root of all evil, but with regulations is the root of all evil here. You got people who are ruining
free market
the plant.
Enterprise stimulates economies, and the problem is when you limit free market enterprise, you put the money into the hands of select few, which is always the goal with legislative bodies, the way things that are set up. I think that for me, it's the same thing for me. I was like doing mostly agronomic consulting, working with other people, setting up farms and all this stuff. I'm tired of it. I got tired of working with people who don't want to. Then it's not all like most of the 90% of the people I work with are successful, right? But there's that 10% of people where it's like, dude, if you don't follow instructions or if you don't just have faith in the program and let it do its thing, if you keep trying to you panic every time you see something wrong and you want to react and you just, it doesn't work. You have to trust the program. The program is based off of data. Every system is a little bit different. So the dial-in process may take, a run or whatever. But, the whole thing is the legal market is a goddamn nightmare, to be completely honest. And there's no federal regulation anyway. So it's all huge risk. And I stopped trying to invest my time and energy into the legal market because it doesn't have anything but dead end walls, taxation, regulation by people who don't give a shit or don't even know about the plant, who are just told what to do by somebody who's paying them. So I don't like to really play around in that space. I kind of do some things. I work as a consulting, and I've got a project that I'm going to be working with Yellow Wolf's mom, her cannabis brand. And it's going to be, me just making connections, though, putting them together with farms that I already work with that create quality products. So that way they can package and distribute a high quality product in different areas.
And do you think that's the future? Do you see any positive? Do you think there's going to be a blend between what the culture has created, what's been around for decades, and be able to mix it with this corporate machine that's been really let loose without any real leash?
So let's look at T-Call. That's Method Man's brand, right? So Method Man doesn't hold any licenses. He doesn't have a grow or anything else. What they do is they essentially they sign a business contract with a farm. Now, they don't have any QC. I know because I talked to them when I was in Las Vegas last time. They don't have quality control. They don't have somebody like myself who's actually writing out the SOPs, looking at these farms' data, giving them their products, making sure they're implementing proper integrated pest management protocols. I have an advantage because I already work with people in all of the states, so I could take a small independent owner operator, in which oftentimes they don't have these huge sales forces, they don't have huge marketing teams, but they have really good product, and partner up with somebody who has a large following, large media presence that can help push that brand. And so the idea is for me to act as a catalyst to connect and distribute high quality product from high end farms for the mainstream market.
I love that, man. That's like I was a director of a cultivation facility and 4 dispensaries and lounge and all this, and I got burned out very fast. And I'm doing live streams and like trash talking the owner of the brand half the time, and I'm so just like, ugh. And what you're doing is the perfect middle ground, being the plug to the community, being the bridge in between both. I think what the industry is missing right now is someone who actually consumes the product, has a passion for the product, and is really thinking also in the business sense, because business is always important. ROI is major important. But a lot of these brands are only focused on the cash, not the crop. The crop is what gets you the cash, but it's a disconnect.
Yeah, the disconnect too with a lot of these corporate brands is they don't understand community. They don't understand roots, because cannabis is inherently intertwined into music and culture, and not just one type of music, but all types of music, all types of culture. And so you have to be appealing to what that is. You have to know what that is. It's not just, oh, here's a shiny picture of, a fancy bag with, a funny cartoon character on it. That's not, it's community based, man. There's nothing else like it. There's no other industry like it on the planet.
I think that's why all of us are so passionate about it. It's the full-time thing we do. I mean, how many people chose a plant other than orchids that I can think of that are just diehard? This is what I do, and
Yeah.
I think,
Pepper growers too. I know some pepper growers that are hardcore pepper enthusiasts, but yeah.
it's pretty. And I think that's where the people who have had the opportunity to get into the commercial side haven't necessarily had that passion. They've just had the profit already, so they can get there. But now it's really evening out, because these brands are realizing they need the community. And whether it's a toxic person on the other side, the Chad or the Brad, I hate even saying that because all people I know named Chad are awesome dudes. But the people who are controlling this market right now, they're starting to see and tap into the community more. And as long as they continue to do it ethically, they have to be willing to change. And I think that's that 10%. That's the 80-20 type principle. This is that 20% almost, where they just like grind my gears so bad it's hard to have the motivation to want to deal with them. But breaking through that wall is what the masses need, so they won't be smoking this fluffy, pretty Mexican dirt. Because that's really what they're doing. I love that. That's what like, we need to help the people. That's how I look at this. I've already got mine. Well, how can I get yours? How can we help you?
Yeah. That's one of the reasons why, I provide such good solutions so people can cultivate their own too. They don't necessarily have to rely on a dispensary or another farm. we make it really easy, and we make it really easy to get in for the information.
I was going to ask about, wanted to get your thoughts on the movement to Schedule 3. You know, you kind of touch upon federal legalization a little bit. There's talks about it potentially going to a Schedule 3. Some people say it's a good thing. Some people say it's a bad thing. What's your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are, anytime there's any type of government regulation and oversight that limits my ability to operate freely, independently, with liberty, justice, independence, and happiness, I'm against it. What's it going to do? Schedule 4? I'd rather keep it at Schedule 4. It's completely fucking illegal, right? On a federal level. They're going to start fucking with it, and then everything's going to have to get... I'm tired of being fucked with, you know what I mean, when it comes to the plant. It's a goddamn plant. Why don't you just deschedule it completely and call it a tomato, and let's get over all the this. Ain't nobody dying smoking the shit, dude. Everybody's a little bit of... some legislators are crazy because it gets you a little bit high. It's like...
Makes you think critical.
Yeah.
Makes you think for yourself a little bit.
This isn't... I'm just over it. I don't care what the federal government says. That's my take on it. I don't care what they say, because they're all full of shit. They're all fucking liars. They all take my goddamn hard-earned tax money and do dirty, filthy things with it that I do not approve as a human being or an American. So they can go f themselves.
Hell yeah, man!
That's
Really,
that's the best answer I think we've gotten of asking this
Well
question.
said, yeah.
yeah. And I appreciate you keeping it clean too, man, because that's a lot of the passion there. I can feel it, brother. I can feel it. So thanks, man. Man, we touched on a lot of great subjects today, brother. I think it was a great conversation, a lot of insight, and you bring a very worthy conversation to the table, Brandon. Really appreciate it. If anyone's listening, man, and if you wanted them to follow, if they wanted to follow you along, where could they find you?
Yeah, so we're on all social media: LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Bokashi Earthworks. And then also my personal IG is Rust, RUST.Brandon, just like the letters right there at the left hand of the screen. And then www.bokashiearthworks.net. I encourage everybody to go there, even if you're not buying products or anything like that. At least go to the blog site, and there's so much good information. We spend a lot of time writing really in-depth articles there, and if anybody wants to find out a lot of information about a wide range of topics, it's there.
That's fantastic, man.
Next time we're all out, maybe MJ BizCon next year, if we can get together, have an in-person episode and sesh about it, and really vent on the government together, because I love that kind of talk, man.
Absolutely.
I love it.
Remember, self-sufficiency is the true path to independence.
And it's the biggest enemy to the government, unfortunately.
It is.
What a great way to end things, guys. Thank you so much for being here with us today, man. Really appreciate you joining us. It was an honor. And we'll make sure that we let you know when we drop this episode. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm Pigeons. That's Rob. That's Mr. Grow It. And Brandon Russ. Thank you so much for joining us today, man. We're out of here.
Next time, guys.